So yeah, welcome to the show and tell. I believe it's sprint 4 or 5. So these are just a session to kind of keep everyone kind of updated of the progress that we're making. And if you didn't know already, if you're going to stay around for the workshop sessions after kind of we provide an update, please grab a pen and paper because there will be some physical activities to do. So what have we kind of done over the last 2 weeks? So FutureGov kind of joined 2 weeks ago. So we've kind of been getting up to speed on kind of all the good work done so far. We've started to kind of shape some outcomes based on our hopes and fears from the last time. And we're also kind of starting to work out what problems we want to solve with the digital planning notice and start to have conversations around where we are with the engagement playbook. Sorry, my screen's so noisy. So I'm going to throw over to Harriet, I think, now.
Hi everyone, I'm Harriet. So I'm the service designer on this project, and what I've been busy with the last 2 weeks is really trying to get to grips with what the problem is that we're trying to solve, to make sure that we're not just jumping into solutions and producing something beautiful. We need to make sure that we understand what the problem is that we're trying to solve so that we can test, easily get out and easily test things to understand if those things have an impact on the problem and therefore if we're designing the right thing. So next slide, please, Scotty. So this was what came out of the hopes and fears exercise that we did a couple of weeks ago, and there were lots of statements about why we're doing this work. Next slide, please, Scotty. So what I've tried to do is organise that into a sort of basic theory of change, because some of these things are not outcomes, they are things that we want to do. So on the left-hand column, we've got, by doing this, so by increasing accessibility of planning content and data, by creating greater transparency and standardisation of information, and by communicating the wider benefits of the scheme, will hopefully lead to greater representation of young people, increased diversity of perspectives, and that the whole point of doing that is to achieve better social and economic outcomes for all. So I think that we've got a few holes here, that by doing the things on the left, what we need to test is whether that will lead to greater representation of young people and increased diverse perspectives. But if you can just go to the next slide, please, Scotty. I think there's a bigger question around what the problem is that we're trying to solve. So why are we trying to achieve greater representation of young people, and why are we trying to increase perspectives? Is that because we believe that there is a problem with those people not being involved in a part of the planning process at the moment? Because if that is the problem that we're trying to solve, what we need to understand is what the scope of the planning notice is to influence that problem. So if I can just have the next slide. So yeah, is this a group that's being negatively impacted, and how will the planning notice change this? We need to make sure, if this is the problem, that the planning notice is occurring at the right point in the process so that people can actually still have an impact, which will lead to better social and economic outcomes. So next slide. Another thing that I think is important to think about is that we believe that doing these things on the left will lead to more feedback, better quality feedback, or is it about more buy-in for developments? So what are the things that we expect to happen if we create a better planning notice? And then also, what will happen? What will we do with this feedback and better quality feedback? How are we going to make sure that that's actually used in a way that achieves this longer term aim of social and economic outcome, better social and economic outcomes? So just on the final slide, the purpose of kind of doing all of this thinking is to think about what we're going to achieve within this alpha. So if the problems are that people don't know when to engage with planning to influence changes in their area, and that we always hear from the same people, then this alpha, we will test how much the planning notice will impact on these problems. So will that lead to a greater diversity of people involved? Will an improved planning notice help people engage at the right time to influence changes in their area? and what are the other constraints around the planning notice that impact on the problem. So for instance, if we get lots more feedback from young people, great, we've achieved something that we set out to do, but then what? Like the so what? So what are we going to do with that? So we'll need to ensure that the other things are dealt with in future work. So does anybody have any questions or any opinions or points of view on that?
I mean, we've discussed this already, but yeah, I think that point around thinking about how we collect information and stuff, and I think thinking about because yeah, what do we do with the information we've currently got? For example, it's really hard to go through. We manually go through it and we summarize it, and it also means that it's really difficult to sort of aggregate that. And also to store it anywhere. It tends to just be summarized in a committee report, and then that's it. It's sort of lost then. So those points around thinking about, well, the constraints around this. So if we improve in engagement, actually, I guess the next stage of it, and like you say, like whether or not that's scope for kind of the next stage, but I think thinking about it now is really important in terms of, well, how do we, like, we need to think about how we collect it to make that information more more valuable, the information that we do get. So it's about broadening it, but it's also about actually making it kind of easier and kind of quicker to get insights for officers, but also for anyone else who's looking at the results of consultation exercises as well, whether that's other members of the public or developers or so on.
Yeah, sure. And this is just, it's reiterating that point that the planning notice is only part of the problem about why people can't engage at the right time and influence changes in the area. There's a whole other series of things, and hopefully through this project, the testing that we do will surface some of those.
I also think it's important how we're going to present this information. So I had a vision yesterday that our digital twin of a site notice would be almost like a dashboard. It would show all the various parts of the scheme. And obviously, if we're collecting information and presenting it better, you can go into a scheme and look at the dashboard. And then if we're collecting holistically of everything happening, then you have dashboards of kind of the borough in general. And you could have things like how many homes we're getting, and people could link into that. So it could just make data so much easier to present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose what we don't want to lose sight of is that we don't want to kind of put all of our energy and time into creating a beautiful dashboard that no one can find because we haven't thought about the bit that goes before the dashboard, or that then no one knows what to do next because we haven't thought about the bit after the dashboard. So the dashboard will solve a problem of providing better information. But if a person doesn't know how to influence based on the information that they have received, like, then the whole project, kind of the end-to-end service or the whole project's process hasn't really been fulfilled, and the problem won't be solved. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I think, Steph, you're going to talk through the next section. Oh, Steph, you're on mute.
That would help. So yeah, the other activity that we got people to do last week was to start kind of generating and prioritizing some hypotheses. So jump to the next slide, Scotty. So this activity we kind of and started kind of emphasizing with different typology or different types of users to kind of understand what might be important to them, how they're feeling at different parts of the process, why are they motivated or not to get involved. And we've been looking at a lot of the research that exists around the perceived challenges that people face in accessing planning, or what they don't like about development. So there's some really good research by Create Street, Centre for London, that looks into the expressed reasons why people oppose development, and equally we've been speaking to lots of the team in Camden and elsewhere to kind of get different views on some of the challenges around planning engagement. Next slide, please, Scotty. So what we did was take some of these hypotheses and get people to kind of rate how much or otherwise they agreed with them, and then to start kind of providing some evidence, either from studies or from their experience, as to why they related different factors more or less strongly. Next slide, Scotty. So we tied all of these up, thankfully, for you. And what we then also did was prioritise them on the basis of their potential impact, but also on the basis of the amount of effort it might take to bring them about. And these are some of the highest priority ones. So how can we use simple, clear and consistent language in planning proposals, with an emphasis on the clear, actually, because planning notices at the moment are consistent, but they are consistently not very accessible. So I think kind of the simple and clear language we think can help and can help residents kind of comprehend what is the change that might be taking place in their neighbourhood, in their environment, and hopefully that consistency of better language will help them recognise notices and what's going on more consistently. Being clearer about the call to action within that site notice. So what is it that people, residents and others should do on seeing a notice? So how can we make the first steps, I guess, on that journey of engaging more clear, more understandable, and frankly also give residents a better information about the choice that they are making to engage, so whether to engage or not. Is it obviously, or certainly to me, obviously one of the most important things is to actually make them more visually appealing, so and legible. I'm sure if you put a planning notice through any kind of accessibility checker, it wouldn't be so. You know, basic things like the font size, the design, the layout. We've learnt a lot over the last kind of decade about what good design for accessibility is, and site notices currently will fail on that. So how can we make them more visually appealing and easier to understand? Next slide, please, Scotty. Also, we were thinking about how we can ensure that planning proposals are available on different channels. So there are more opportunities and reasons for people to engage. And equally, how can we make the information more available to residents? So what is the more granular information that might appeal to residents and make them more relevant? Sorry, there's been a COVID case in my kid's reception, so my wife's running away to pick him up. Also, giving residents clear information about how their input will be used. So again, being clear about what kinds of representations residents can and should make, and being realistic and honest about the influence that will have. This is a challenging one because, you know, being clearer about the relatively limited influence that residents can have maybe at the late stages of planning on an application, that might put people off, but we think it's important to be clearer about what people can influence up front. Next slide, Scotty. These are our kind of medium impact kind of priorities. So using the notice to, and it's a bad word, but kind of educate people about what they can influence and where. Clearly, more strategic issues that are at the top of the brains of many people can only really be influenced through the local plan, but how can we point people towards those parts of the planning process where different types of influence can be made. And then the second one is about more information about the impact of a planning proposal. So within the evidence base of a planning application, be it the transport impact assessment, the environmental impacts assessment, there is a lot of information about the impact on a neighbourhood, but it's quite hidden at the moment. So might that be elevated, as it were, to the front of a planning notice, and would that increase engagement? I think that's very important, but it is quite a difficult one potentially to achieve at this point in time. And another one that was flagged, but we thought it might be kind of quite difficult to achieve and relatively, or like kind of medium impact, is how can there be a two-way channel of communication between the developers and the residents, so that residents can speak to the other key actor really in the process, and maybe influence the developer directly rather than through the council. Next slide, please, Scotty. So all of these hypotheses and how we've ranked them are available on our Trello, and obviously we'll share this slide deck openly afterwards, so you can click in on that and look at how we've done, and kind of please do comment if you disagree, if there's more information you want to provide about. So we've provided a bit more detail in all of these about kind of who's the user, what's the problem, and so on. So next up is Alex.
Hi, so I'm Alex, I'm the product designer on this team. So one thing that we looked at last time was mapping the impact that different developments might have and how that data is recorded, so we can understand what kind of information needs to be in the planning notice. So the things we've looked at so far are local roads, green space, environment, local schools, local healthcare, how the area looks, deprivation, change of use, local waste facilities, and local. These were things that came up in a report that Shelter did, that were things that the public were interested in. Next slide, please. So I've put these into a spreadsheet after we've gathered everyone's feedback last week, and I've highlighted some cells in yellow, which are things that we'd like examples of, and I know that Rich and some others have started to gather that information. Next slide, please. So yeah, the spreadsheet maps out all the data. I'm looking for these examples. There was an email sent around with a link to that spreadsheet, so if you have time to try and find some of these, that's really useful. Next slide. Oh yeah, that's me. I think it's Brit now. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. So next slide, Scotty. So we've also got across the work that's already been done to think about the content and the different users for the playbook, for the digital planning engagement playbook. Just wanted to test this really with you. So we know you started detailing the user stories or user needs in Miro around the kind of planning officers and what they need at different points when they're thinking about engagement. So for us to help think about how to best structure that information and what format to present it in, it's important that we understand the purpose of the playbook and nail that so that then we can make it, I guess, the most useful for the people that are using it. So yeah, we have articulated that as kind of twofold. The first being around executing engagement effectively, so being able to kind of minimize financial resources and also save time for planning officers when they go to do engagement. And then secondly, it's about improving the quality of the planning engagement by presenting best practice, but potentially also it could be about helping increase diversity of engagement. So I might just pause there to ask whether or not that kind of captures the main purpose, or if we're missing anything there.
Well, I think that, yeah, I think that captures the main purpose of it. I mean, I think the thing from our point of view is around all the work that was done to kind of quickly try and adapt onto a digital platform because of COVID. That stuff hasn't been lost. That we get it down, and that we can kind of assist others who maybe haven't made that same progress, but then also we kind of provoke a bit more thought about how we can keep developing that and improve it, and like you say, kind of improve that diversity of feedback as well, and the quality of it.
Great. Yeah, because I think the COVID response, whilst we're still very much in it, it was almost like a shift at a point in time. But if we're making this something that's useful and meaningful and has a life kind of beyond, I think it's really about like thinking about how to do engagement well, and structuring the information in that way.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything more on this one that they'd like to add? No? Okay, jump to the next slide, Scotty. So now and get a bit creative with thinking about what the planning notice might look like. So Alex is going to lead us through this exercise, which is going to be using Miro, but then also going back to old school pen and paper. Break. And then we're going to come back